Hey friend, Niklas here from Your Audio Solutions. I hope you're doing well. On today's show, we have not just one guest, but we have three. On the first, for Your Audio Solutions, we have a round table interview. And I'm very happy to welcome Phil Naish, Dave Martin, and Bobby Dellarocco from Sweetwater Studios. Phil Naish is a Grammy award-winning producer and keyboardist from his work with Steven Curtis Chapman, and is now the executive producer at Sweetwater Studios. Dave Martin is a bass player with 40 plus years of experience. He had his own studio in Nashville, and he has worked with artists such as Bootsy Collins, Eric Johnson, and Dweezil Zappa, and many, many others. Dave is now a producer, engineer, and bassist at Sweetwater Studios. Bobby Dellarocco is Sweetwater's audio engineer, and if he's not found making samples, he can be found making records for artists and bands at Sweetwater Studios, as well as working closely with Phil and Dave. It was a real pleasure talking to these guys, and I think you're gonna love it too. And as you can imagine, being a roundtable interview through Skype, there might be some lag, or there is some lag, but I hope you can see past that. The audio is smooth, but sometimes you see a lag in the video, but I think you're gonna love it anyway. And if you prefer to listen to this, it's also available on Apple Podcast and Spotify. There's links to that below as well. In this interview, we spoke about producing records, engineering records, what your role as a producer and engineer is, how they work as a team in the Sweetwater Studios, how they find clients and how they market their studio, how to realize the potential of a song, and the importance of listening and be able to find your place as a musician, and like Dave and Phil, how they can find their place within a song. We also spoke about the Nashville number system, and much, much more. I think you're going to really love this interview. But before we get into the interview, I want to tell you about a free guide you can download right away. It's called 3 Tested Ways to Increase Your Client Base. And I made this guide for home studio owners or freelancers who wants to increase their client base. So in this guide, you can learn my tested email script of how to contact bands online, how to get clients offline in real life, so to speak, and how to get clients coming back for more. It's free. Just enter your email address and I'll send it to you right away. Link is in the description below. But that's it. Let's get into the interview with Phil, Dave, and Bobby. Okay, guys. Well, yeah, first of all, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have all of you here, and thank you for taking your time. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
I thought it would be really good idea if we start off introducing you guys, maybe one by one. If you start with Phil, we can go to Dave and then Bobby. Maybe you can let the listeners or the people watching, let them know who you are and what you do at Sweetwater, and maybe who you worked for in the past.
Okay. Hi, I'm Phil Naish. I guess my formal title is executive producer, but I'm a keyboard player and arranger by trade. I produced a bunch of contemporary Christian music before I came to Sweetwater down in Nashville. I worked in Nashville about 35 years and moved up to Sweetwater about almost 6 years ago, and have been working up here playing keyboards on sessions and arranging, producing different contacts that we have, clients that want everything from a jingle to a full-blown produced record. So that's me.
Cool. Thanks, Phil. Yeah, and Dave.
And so I'm essentially wearing both of Phil's hats. I'm a bass player and I'm a producer and I'm also an engineer. So depending on the project, I may have any or all of those roles going on at the same time. It's something that I've been doing for 25 or 30 years now, so I'm used to it. But in any case, whichever one I'm doing, that's what I'm here to do.
Right. So that's either producing and engineering, you said, or playing.
Either producing or engineering or playing or any combination of the three.
All right. Cool. Well, yeah, thanks, Dave. Let's move on to maybe Bobby.
Hey, so I am Bobby Dellarocco. I am an audio engineer. I think that's my title here at Sweetwater. I've been here about 3 years. Primarily, I do just that, audio engineering. I play guitar and I make a lot of what's called EDM sounds. That doesn't too much apply in my role here, but it's something that I do all the time in my spare time. I think I've made something like 10,000 individual samples that can be heard in music on the radio and stuff like that.
So what kind of samples are those, by the way?
So like those are typically ranging from either just individual drum sounds or synthesizer sounds up to loops, transition effects, just stuff that like producers anywhere can just grab and throw into their session to spice up their song.
Cool, man. And 10,000 is quite a lot, I guess. It must have taken you some time and dedication.
Yeah, it was over the course of a few years, some for various companies, and then others just like on my own. Like there was one day I emptied out my entire kitchen and sampled every single pot and pan that I had because why not?
Yeah. Well, so were those hits or?
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, hits, and then actually I ended up using the I took some silverware and just kind of jingled it around, and I ended up using that a lot, over top of a snare drum, for example, just to give it like a clangy splash to it.
That's cool. I mean, so are you guys able to collaborate on stuff? So if you do like a cool sample, maybe they will use it or Phil will use it. Is that how you guys work in Sweetwater
Yeah,
Studios?
I've actually used some of Bobby's stuff on tracks that I've had. He's great at like just, hey, go get me this kind of sound, and he'll build it and then bring it back, and we'll drop it into a track. So that just for a transition or a build or kind of a sweep thing going into a chorus, he's great at that.
Nice. I mean, you're making samples. I mean, it's a tedious job, I guess. You have to be very meticulous. Is that a word?
Yeah, it takes a lot of attention to like the really specific details. Especially when it comes to doing stuff like, for example, guitar samples. It's not like when it like if you have a riff that's within a song, it's not being analyzed with a super critical ear because it's meshed with bass and drums and all sorts of other stuff. Right. But when it's just on its own, like I'm going through and quantizing things down to the sample within that riff. That way, it can be dropped in pretty much any song and fit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool, man. So, Bobby, maybe I can start with you actually. How did you end up at Sweetwater Studios? What was the journey?
My journey. Well, so I went to. To go all the way back to the beginning, I'm from just outside of Boston, Massachusetts, but I went to school in Columbus, Ohio, at Capital University. And for school, I did my internship here at Sweetwater. That was back in 2010, I think, end of 2010, so almost 10 years ago.
Wow, yeah.
And that's where I first got kind of introduced to the being that like is Sweetwater. And then finished up school, kind of bounced around, did some live sound, was always producing like my own music, and then had the opportunity to teach here in the Sweetwater Academy. So I was teaching like a lot of audio engineering, recording, beat making, sound design, stuff like that. And then the opportunity opened up in the recording studio, and since I was already since I had done my internship during school, they kind of knew me, and my name got thrown into the hat, and they chose me, and then I became the assistant engineer for a few years, and then I think it was about a year and a half ago I became a full-time audio engineer now, rather than an assistant engineer. So It's been a long, crazy ride, and I've enjoyed most of it, I guess.
Yeah. And it's just a shame that the 10-year anniversary is this year, I guess, when we're all stuck inside. But it will get better.
Oh yeah.
And maybe how about you, Dave? How did you end up in Sweetwater?
Well, a kind of circuitous route in that I owned a studio in Nashville for about 25 years called Java Jive.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was my place. And back in around 2000, I hired a kid out of school to be my assistant. And he ended up being the director of recording up here, a guy named Mark Hornsby. So Mark came up here 7 years ago, Phil?
Yeah, at least 7. Yeah.
Or around there. Anyway, so Mark, I've known since 2000. He worked for me for a while. Then he went down to Florida and ended up with his studio. And then after a hurricane took out his studio, he came back and rented my B room. And then he came up here to take over the position of director of recording. When he got here, and so when he was in my room, he was around when I was engineering and producing and playing bass. So when he came up here and started doing projects in Fort Wayne, he realized he didn't have a rhythm section. I started by coming up here to play bass on projects. And I think Phil probably started by coming up here to play keyboards on Mark's projects because, experienced session guys are not the same as being experienced musicians. It's an entirely different skill set. So
what's the difference there, by the way?
Do what?
What's the difference between a session musician and a musician, as you put it?
There's really, I would say, a couple of things. The first of which is you have to have repeatability in the studio. So you have to, it's a greater level of detail oriented. When you're playing live, you go for it. And if you miss a note, it's fine because it's already gone. It's in the past.
Right.
And the other one, your goal when you're playing live is to entertain the nice people who come out to see you. When you're playing in the studio, you're only supposed to play it perfectly about the second time you play through it. So chart reading skills are a lot more important for session guys. The ability to not only read the chart correctly, but listen to what everybody else is doing to make those changes and keep track of where the changes are in case you need to undo them later. One thing, and Phil can attest to this, and so can Bobby because he's done it. If you have an experienced session guy and he's running the track and makes a mistake somewhere, he'll play the whole track and then be able to say, okay, I need you to punch me in 2 places because I made a mistake at bar 3 of the second chorus and I need the 3rd bar of the bridge. So to not only realize when you've made the mistake, but to be able to hold that in your head until the end of the song and the conversation afterwards, that's a specific skill set that if you play live, nobody cares about. And so I think that's the biggest single difference is we work at a more granular level. And I don't want to say that our standards are higher, but our standards are different. Than
if I can piggyback on that, what we all kind of do is create parts. So you're not trying to cop a riff you heard on a record or anything. You're actually making parts, and that goes along with what Dave was saying about making notes in your head as you're putting down the tracks.
Yeah, exactly. Was something, and this is something I'm not very good at because I play a bit myself. And Dave, you mentioned it, and that's the ability to listen, right? If you can listen, it can be hard to know where your part is. Where do you fit in the arrangement and all that sort of things. And you guys have obviously a lot of experience in this field, so to speak. What would you say have changed the most for you guys in terms of listening and choosing what to play or not to play? Maybe Phil, you can go first.
Well, I think and now with Pro Tools and all that, you can definitely stretch out more because you don't have the failure of messing up a track on a roll of tape. So you have more options as to what you want to do, and a lot of people will record just in sections, and so you have those are easier to archive the parts with Pro Tools because you've already got designations of verse, chorus, bridge, all that where you would have it on a chart when it was tape, but you definitely didn't have the freedom of being able to punch in or drop in near as quickly as you can now. So you have a little more freedom now, but with that freedom, you need to be able to commit. There are guys that, will go for years and keep the same parts and never commit to whichever one wins. And so that's always a tricky part as well.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. But have you found that your playing has changed too? The better you have become?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's changed as much. We all kind of had the same mindset as session guys. So you definitely grow and learn your niche a little more. So I think that probably changes more. But everybody that works at Sweetwater in the band is so versatile; they can kind of go any direction you want to go. So that's a plus that we have going there.
Right. Cool. Yeah. What about you, Dave? In the same question, so to speak.
I think everybody approaches it different because, like Phil, both of us started back in the days of tape, and so that gives me, my mindset is not in thinking of sections. My mindset is thinking of songs, and so I don't. In general, if I'm producing a record, we're going to start recording at the top and play to the end. And the goal is to not make any mistakes and, then find whatever it is that makes the song better. And, it's all about making the song suit the artist's vision of that song. So I tend to not play with the idea of I can always go back and fix something if I didn't, if I messed it up. The goal for me is always accuracy.
Right.
And so what's changed over the years is, especially once I was doing more producing and less straight engineering, I spend an inordinate amount of time every day listening to music. Whether it's in the car, whether it's at home, whether it's at work here, the goal is to listen, and I'm listening to things that I don't know. So the fact that, I've been playing on country records for 35 or 40 years, I still listen to that, but I'm also listening to Afrobeat stuff, and I'm listening to whatever the new metal stuff is that's coming out of Scandinavia. I just want to hear everything because I might have to play it.
Yeah.
As a session guy, it's kind of in doing what we do here, which is, this week maybe a prog record, next week. Actually, I think I'm doing Phil and I are doing a Christian record for a girl. So what I want to not be is that guy who only knows how to play the stuff that was popular when I was in high school. So, talking to other engineers, talking to other musicians, listening to pretty much whatever I can find. I've been going through a thing for the last couple of weeks where I'm doing a lot of Indonesian and Burmese music. Not that and I may never have occasion to do any of that on a session, but I need to have in my head that this is music to people, so I need to know what it is.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was interviewing another guy the other week, and he said something really interesting because he does covers of older songs and stuff for video games. And he said the biggest difference he found doing covers of the older stuff was that they all play the song from start to finish, right? Nowadays, you might do full take, but then you go back, you punch in, or you might copy and paste stuff. And is that something you guys have found be the biggest difference too? Maybe.
Yeah. So, it's the cut and paste thing now, which is real handy when you're building a track. But sometimes it takes a little bit of the flow of the song away. So I'm with Dave, where I love getting a whole performance. You end up getting a build and a real arc of the music kind of thing that I don't know if you always get when you start cutting and pasting.
Right.
Yeah, and so I think that's part of it. Plus, there's a thing that comes from, if you listen to those songs that were recorded not only in the 70s and 80s, but go back to the 60s and 50s, when the way they made those records, they had everybody out in the room and everybody played it. And I've, because when I moved to Nashville in '85 and started working on sessions, a bunch of the old guys that I was working with then had played on records in the late '50s and early '60s when it was all recorded live. And so I used to love talking to those guys about the old days, because they were the ones, they were like the link back to it. You know, if you're doing a record, I don't know, Phil, did you ever work with Gene Chrisman?
I know Gene, yeah.
So Gene, he was just this guy that I was working on a session with, you know, and he was a drummer and I knew him. And for some reason, the subject of click tracks came up. This was the early '90s when they had first started using them in Nashville.
Right.
You know, and all of us that were on that session were like, I don't care. If they want to use a click track, we'll use a click track. If they don't want a click track, we don't need a click track. And then I pointed out that there are songs that could not have been cut with a click. And the one that I thought of was Aretha's Natural Woman, because it just slows down.
Yep.
And Gene said, I know, I played on it. So when you're working with guys who played on records like that, then it kind of raises your game, and you have to pay a lot more attention when you know that if you screw up, there's 7 guys on that session who are going to have to play it from the top because you screwed it up. So that in my head is still the way I approach it all. I just want to play it right. And that's when it gets to be fun. Yeah. When everybody's on that vibe, everybody plays it right, so that when the engineer hits stop at the end of a take, we know if the song's good because everybody's already played all their parts.
Yeah,
and that's one of the things that when you build parts, and we all do it, where you're building it like maybe a rhythm section, or you start with a loop and you build a part, man, you're a long way into the production before you have any suspicion about whether you're doing anything good or not. You know, because you're hearing framework, but you're not hearing the song yet. And so that's one of the reasons I love tracking. Phil and I did a record here where I think we had 11 people, counting the artist, on the floor going down live.
Yeah, it was great.
Horns, 2 keyboard players, 2 guitar players, drums and percussion, and the artist. And like I said, at the point where we hit stop at the end of the take, we were pretty sure whether we had a track or not, because there wasn't a lot that was going to be added to that.
Right.
And that's just a wonderful thing.
Yeah, that's super cool. And I want to get this question over to Bobby, actually, because Bobby, I believe, you are older than me, but I grew up in the era of, you know, the different take based, like copy and paste, overdubbing more and more. And I get, maybe you're a bit closer to me in age. So how is that mentality for you? Like, what's your approach when it comes to recording?
For me, well, working with Phil and working with Dave is, I'm completely spoiled, because they're so accomplished with what they do, that they play down the whole song, and then immediately Dave will step on his on his talk back and be like, "That was great. I just need to hit this second bar of the second chorus," and then Phil will say, "Okay, yeah, I just need to hit the bridge one more time," and they know exactly what they're doing, and it makes my life super easy, and I don't have to like piece something together from so many various takes. And it really does help the song flow, because they're playing off of one another there, and it creates a much more organic song. Versus like when I'm at home, I typically do the more parts and kind of build the song, copying as well as pasting. But like,
But what do you feel if you have to edit drums and it hasn't been done to your click? Is that a bit annoying, or?
Editing, I think, no matter what, is going to be tedious.
Right.
But at times it is. Dave's laughing over there. But I think it is a necessary evil. Especially once you start getting into like the more modern flourishes, like if you have something sequenced from a synthesizer directly over top of a real human playing, there's going to be some slight flamming. So I think it is necessary in that sense to go through and chop up all the various drums and quantize them to the grid, or if that loop has a specific groove, quantize it then to that groove, or vice versa. Take that loop and then quantize it to the player. Because to compete, I think in the modern music market, everything needs to be locked right in really, really tightly.
Yeah, exactly, man.
Yeah, Bobby's a great editor for that. So I'll hand off stuff and say, please make this sound the way it needs.
Yeah, Phil and I both just hand it all to Bobby and let him do it. And thank you, Bobby.
Of course.
But so it sounds like you guys do a lot of work together then. Is that the case? Because Phil and Dave, you play in the house band, right?
Right.
So how does what's that process?
It works great. I mean, sometimes Dave's kind of driving the ship.
He'll sit out, he'll play usually, and then once he's done with his part, then he's coming in sitting next to, if we're tracking a full rhythm section, I'll be out playing, so Bobby's typically engineering. And then Phil will go in and sit and wear his producer hat. If it's a thing I'm producing, and we do this quite a bit, Phil and I may still be out there working together and Bobby's engineering. And then once my bass tracks are done, then Bobby can go on to another task and I'll engineer the rest of the project. So it works either way. All three of us work together a lot, and it's a cool way to work.
Cool. Yeah. What were you going to say, Phil? Sort of missed.
Well, basically the same thing, but like some days Dave's the producer on it, so I'm just a side man getting my job done, and we're doing piano and maybe B3 on some stuff or some synth, and then I have a rig in my office where I can go and do overdubs later too. So sometimes I'll say, well, just shoot the tracks over to me, and then I'll add some other parts and that kind of thing. So and flip flop. If I'm doing it, then I get with Dave and work on the parts, and it's ready to go.
Cool. And something I'm wondering is, because obviously Sweetwater Studios is such a big facility, right? You have several studios, or rooms, I should say.
Right.
Who decides who get to work on what? Or does someone come specifically to you, Phil or Dave or Bobby? Or how do you get picked for a project?
Who wants to answer this?
Oh, yeah, maybe Phil can go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to say, usually they contact the person they want to talk to about production and that kind of. That's the way it's been. Where if it's a keyboard kind of bass thing, they'll usually come to me and talk about it. But now the thing we're doing next week is a lady that wrote all her songs on piano, so I'm going to be just going in and playing, and then Dave's producing that.
Cool.
And he's got all the arrangements and everything ready to go. So it just depends on basically every project is different. The big room is where we cut all the tracks. Then we have two smaller rooms that are great for overdubs and mix and that kind of thing. So that's kind of the roadmap.
Nice. And yes, sorry, go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say, when somebody calls in, we have a studio manager, Julie, who is, she's like air traffic control over there. She kind of keeps all the rooms and all of us going where we need to do. And if she brings a project, and a lot of times somebody will email the studio and say, I've got this thing, and I'll listen to it and usually talk to the client. Either Bobby or I will generally talk to that client, or Phil. And for me, if it's something that comes in that, and I talk to the client, they send me their demos and I listen to them and they're excited about it, then I'll just go right back to Julie and go, man, this would be great, and Bobby should do it. If it's something that is nearer to his heart than it is mine, because even though all of us can work on anything and have worked on about everything, to me, it makes a certain amount of sense that all of us also listen to things on our own. And if a project comes in that's just closer to what Bobby enjoys, then it would be silly for me to try to do it. I would rather send it on to Bobby or send it on to Phil. We have another engineer here that's our main tech. That that era when he grew up means groups like Jesus Lizard or what are completely all a part of him. And if a band like that comes in, I'm going to say, we need to pass this on to Nicholas, because he's the guy that's going to have the most fun doing it. And I really believe that for all of us, the more fun you can have working on a project, the better the project's going to sound at the end.
Yeah, if it's not fun, I don't want to do it. So that works out well.
Yeah.
Right.
I think we do have such a diverse skill set between everybody here that no matter what project comes in, it will get put in the right hands, no matter what.
Yeah, that's really good.
If it's, if Julie says, hey, here's this project, do you want to do this? And I listen to it and go, yeah, I shouldn't. I think somebody else should do it. I'm passing them. I'm always going to pass them to the guys who it's most appropriate for. I'm the guy that one of my things, unfortunately, not in this era, but up until, March the 13th or whenever it was, I was recording our local symphony.
Man.
That was one of the things I did. And I love doing that. I love recording symphonic music and classical music. So when they come in with like a classical guitar project, usually I'm doing it, or the harp record we did last week. And so that's, to me, that's great. That's something that's in my wheelhouse, and I'm happy to do it. But if it's something that involves bleepy noises, then I'm not going to be the guy that's going to be happiest doing that. I'll let Bobby make bleepy noises, and he, he can talk to that client, and they can speak to each other in bleepy noise language, and it makes.
Yeah. And maybe this is more of a question towards Phil, but since studios, as we all know, they have changed. More and more studios are closing down, etc. Isn't maybe an old story, but what does it take to run a profitable studio these days? I mean, you guys have quite a big setup there, so I guess it must take some work, right?
Well, the nice thing is one of the huge pluses is having the band there. So they know they can come and basically build a record built into the price of what we do. A lot of places now they'll just do overdubs, and like Dave was talking about, having the whole band in the room is so much more conducive to getting a great performance and that kind of thing. So we have that plus there. The smaller rooms and the house studios and stuff, usually they're going to cut one piece at a time, and so it can work great, but you don't have that camaraderie and just simpatico that you do when everybody's in the room doing the same thing.
Right. And what's the main way for you to get clients to the studio? Is it mainly through having the band there as well then, or?
I'll let you guys answer that, because you got to talk to more people than I do.
Right. Clients come from a number of different areas. Some of them come in because they know us. I've done a number of records that are people that I've done records with before I came here. And so if they want to come and work with me, I'm happy to work with them here. Some clients come in because they've heard of it, and they'll send like a query via the website. And then another way that we get them, and Phil didn't quite mention this when you asked what does it take to be able to run a successful multi-room studio in this day and age. Having all the resources of Sweetwater Sound behind us is a really wonderful thing.
Right.
Because of that, we're not worried. Things that when I owned my own studio, and Phil will know this, things that you really worry about, like making payroll. That's not really a big issue because, we have 1,800 people working in this facility.
Wow.
Sweetwater is gigantic. It's the largest online retailer in the U.S.
Is it?
Oh, yeah. So we sell a bunch of gear. And, from the three of us, our perspective is it's nice that they put all those people there to help support what we do. But, that's a big help. And we do a lot of our work for Sweetwater employees. They hire, we've got 650 or so, 700 sales engineers, guys who are on the phone selling gear. But most of those, guys are also musicians.
Right.
And so, I've probably done, 5 or 6 this year with Sweetwater employees, and then their friends will come in, local people will come in. So we get clients like everybody else does. The mouth is essentially the driver of all of it. Mm-hmm. Either the word of mouth about one of us, we've had guys who came in specifically because, they went, "Oh, Phil Naish is here. I love that Steven Curtis Chapman thing." Mm-hmm. So, he's the guy who did it. I want that guy. And that's great. And then we have guys who just say, "Oh, I've heard of Sweetwater Studios. I saw a video where Rick Nielsen was playing guitar, so I want to come work there."
Yeah.
So, there's the studio has a reputation in and of itself. Those of us who work here have a reputation. The guitar player and the drummer who are part of our rhythm section are also over in our marketing department. So if you go to Sweetwater's YouTube channel, for example, and there'll be a bunch of stuff there where they're showing guitar gadgets or guitars or amps. That's usually going to be Don Carr, who's the guitar player in the studio, who's doing that. So we have people who will call and go, "Can Don play on my record? Then I'll come there." "Sure, come on."
Right.
And Nick DiVirgilio is the house drummer who played with a prog band named Spock's Beard. He was a Cirque du Soleil guy. He played with Tears for Fears. He's in a UK group called Big Big Train. Mm-hmm. So for the world of prog, people are calling because Nick is here, and they're booking sessions so that they can work with Nick. Mm-hmm. I think, Bobby, did you end up recording the Steve Howe record?
So
Steve Howe was doing a new record. He wanted Nick on it. So, that's a real handy way to get work to come in, is having a drummer that people want to record on their records.
Right. Yeah, because I saw you also doing, you, Dave, you have a lot of articles on their website too. So are you guys doing like a lot of content marketing too? Is that also part of the plan?
We're doing a certain amount. And in the last couple of weeks, the marketing guys who were responsible for us decided that we needed to do that blogs from the engineers would be good. And Bobby and I have written a bunch of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's kind of, they tell me to write and I write. I started writing articles for like Recording Magazine. You're in the UK. I think I did some stuff for Audio Media back in the day.
Right.
I've done EQ. I did some stuff for Mix, for Bass Player Magazine. But there was a time in the mid 90s when I had spare time, so I was writing articles. So people who still remember those articles, and so when they say we need you to write, okay, it's something I know how to do. I'm fairly opinionated. I know that Bobby's shocked to hear that.
This is my surprised face.
Yeah, no. So when, this blog thing that they've started doing for the studio now, or I do a column for one of Sweetwater's publications called The Well-Equipped Bassist, that's just straight up opinion.
Yeah.
And so I am happy to climb up on a soapbox and tell the world the truth as I see it.
Yeah. That's good. Was it you, Bobby, also do a lot of content marketing then? I see you done more on the engineering side, right?
Oh yeah. I think the first one since we did the work from home thing that I did was on specifically, it was Isotope RX. And it was how to remove vocals, and it forced me to kind of look into other software and like other techniques that I've never really used before, and then learn it inside and out, and then show people, which kind of was what I was doing beforehand teaching. Because if like someone came in and they used, let's say, Ableton Live, that's something that I didn't have a ton of experience with, but once again, being backed by Sweetwater and having such an enormous powerhouse, I was able to get a copy of it, learn it inside and out, and then be able to show people how to use it from there. And then doing like the content, it's fun. Like Dave's been writing for years. For me, I had to pretend that I was back in high school and like write like an actual outline and do all that again.
Yeah.
It kind of felt like I was back in English class.
Right.
But I don't know. It was really cool.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, yeah, they're really good articles from both of you, so it's really good.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks.
But is there anything else you guys do to bring clients in, or is usually the word of mouth that is the key, so to speak?
I think in the long term, that's the key. There's some short-term stuff in that they went through a thing where Bobby and our assistant were trying to just go out and meet people. There was a thing going on in Indianapolis that had bands every week, so they were going down there for a while just to meet folks and tell them who we are. We have gone to a couple of like things. I don't know if they have that there, but here there's a big organization called Folk Alliance. And so we were not able to go to the main conference, but we went to a regional conference. You just meet people and say, hey, we're with Sweetwater. We love what you do. We'd love to talk to you. And then, you reach out. So we are doing outreach on a number of different levels.
Right.
But so much of that, the interesting thing is that's mostly medium and long term.
Right. Exactly.
Because as a guy who's owned studios for years, I've had people, that I know real well that'd go, man, I just did a new record. I wish I'd thought about you. And Phil, as a producer, it's like he'll run into somebody, at the Cracker Barrel and go, man, we just did that. I should have called you about coming to your studio. So a huge part of that, of the outreach, is just to hope that at the time someone decides it's time to do a record, that we come up.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if we don't, then their brain hooks on wherever it is that they think they need to go and who they need to go with. And so a lot of the outreach that we'll do, whether it's just, staying in touch with friends on social media, or with me, social media doesn't really help. The Messenger app does.
Right.
Because obviously for the last 5 or 6 weeks, it would be silly to go, hey, I'm Dave from the Sweetwater Studio. Why don't you come and record? That's not helpful. What's helpful is to go, hey, it's Dave. How you doing? Everything okay? Anything we can do to help? Hang in there. Wash your hands.
Yeah.
So it's not like we can be out selling studio time at this point. What we can be doing is just checking in with our friends and making sure that they're all still alive.
Yeah, exactly, man. I mean, that's something I've noticed myself a lot, is the key seems to be, building relationships. That's the name of the game, essentially, right?
Right.
Yep.
And I mean, maybe for Phil, maybe how was it when you started out? Did it take long for you to build relationships to eventually get into being a producer, playing keyboards for people?
I started out just playing on sessions, and then as things evolved, like on the next record, the arranger couldn't do it; he was too busy, so they started throwing me stuff that way. And then the producers that I was working with were kind of going, it's almost like an apprenticeship kind of thing. So they would be moving on or have too big of a selling record that they can't do these anymore. So they would hand off projects to me to work on things that before I just played on. But again, back to your point, the relationships, the artist was already comfortable with me because I would make tweaks and arrangement tweaks and stuff as we went, as we were recording. So it was a logical thing for me to kind of step into production and arranging of that the next time. And so that's how those kind of relationships evolved and helped me evolve from a player to a producer.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that seems to definitely be a thing. And you have to have patience, right?
Oh yeah, big time. You have to be ready. And what I tell everybody is, practice, but also just have your craft really, really well crafted. That's not the best way to say it, but where when the door does open, and it will open, that you're ready to go. That you're not unprepared for the next job. And that's a big point in session life and recording life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sorry, Dave.
I was going to say, and life as a whole. The other thing and Phil was alluding to it, but I'll be more specific.
Mm-hmm.
At least for Phil and I, we had people, and Bobby, I assume so. We're trying to help. But when I started doing this, I moved from the world of playing live music to playing on sessions to eventually I accidentally ended up with the studio and grew into that. But through all of those steps, I had mentors, people who were smarter than me and more experienced than me and usually more talented than me, who were willing to reach out the hand and go, come on, you can come up and do this.
Right.
And that's a huge part. All of us here have had that. And so those relationships, some of those guys I've been working with for more than 30 years now. And I'm still passing them work and they're still passing me work. So the personal relationship counts not just on the musical side, but also on the technical side and on the personal side.
Exactly.
It's nice to know when I first bought my first gear, back in 90, whenever that was, there were people that I could call and go, I don't understand how to do this. and they would take time to go, here's how you do this. And, and tell me what I needed to do and how I needed to do it. And at least one of those guys, who's a marvelous Nashville engineer, I talked to 2 days ago, and we're still sharing ideas, after probably 35 years since I met Vorndick for the first time.
Right.
And he sent stuff up here and I've sent stuff to him. So the idea is those personal relationships. We are a recording studio, but I've never considered any studio to be competition with the other studios. Just like no bass player is competition to me. I want us all to be busy. Mm-hmm. And so we do work for other studios. When we send stuff out, like, for example, if I need a steel guitar on a record, I can't get it in Fort Wayne. So, because there aren't any. So I will send that work down to Nashville, where we're giving work to another studio down there. Mm-hmm. And then when they need what we have up here, then they send it up to us. And so that relationship, the personal relationship thing, is not just among musicians. It's also on the business side. The studios, we help other studios, they help us. And that's the way it ought to be.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. And Bobby, what has your experience been like in terms of having mentors and all that sort of stuff?
Well, it's nice to have mentors, like, especially here. Like as I alluded to earlier, I'm more from like the electronic and then the more audio engineering side. But for example, a few months ago, I've never recorded a what's called organ or a accordion before.
Right.
I've recorded a lot of organ with Phil, but never recorded. I've never recorded in accordion. It was for a project that Dave had brought in. And it's great being able to be like, Dave, what's the best way to do this? And there's so many resources just right here that I can tap into to just learn more and become a better engineer. And then think with the relationship thing, it's like you need to stay in touch with people and don't lose your contacts. Always reach out. Just even say like, hey, how's it going? I think that's super important to continue to really do, especially now that we're all kind of stuck inside.
Yeah, exactly, man.
So you're like, hey, are you still alive? Great to hear. Love that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it also goes down to, I mentioned it before about patience. So you can't just expect to reach out to someone and say, hey, are you, and expect to be hired. It takes, it's a long game, I guess, right?
That it is, yeah.
Yeah.
It took me 10 years to get hired
exactly.
here.
Yeah.
And one thing that happens, especially with bigger records, is you don't, like, they're still a little nervous about hiring a new guy because if it doesn't work out, then they're out money and all the investment that they've made. So, your track record definitely helps. A guy like if I'm coming in and I say, hey, Dave would be great on this, then you're vouching for the guy, and that makes the producer or client way more comfortable. And so that's always that part of the relationship is a big part as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's something I assume has been built over all these years, right? Since you guys started.
Exactly. I mean, you know, the ones that have been there the longest, they've they're the pros and work on all kinds of different things and can handle pretty much any client, because they'll go from, super nice to psychotic, and you've got to be able to deal with both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, yeah. Was for a question for Bobby, actually. There was something I read on the profile on your website, and it says when it comes to working with clients on their songs, you aspire to, or you actually fully realize the potential of a song, right? That's what it was. Something about paraphrasing what it says on the website. Just wondering, how do you fully realize the potential of a song? What's your process in doing that?
I think it's a combination of really trying to understand what the artist's main vision is, as well as getting some sort of a reference point, right, from them. So, for example, if they want something that has the vibe of a modern pop Halsey song, and then between taking that and taking what they have, whether it's even just a small demo recording that they like sung into their phone, I really try and have a vision going in and try and create that vision. And a lot of times it's just a matter of trying to understand what the artist means. Because if they say they want a song that's kind of purple, like that's a little bit tough, especially for me and Dave.
That's an artist
colorblind. But yeah, I think the making sure that there's a lot of open communication between the artist, the producer, and the audio engineer is extremely important in order to fully realize somebody's vision.
Yeah, I mean, you actually you nailed it when you said someone can say I want to sound purple. I guess you can get all sorts of references when it comes to how artists wants their music to sound.
Yeah.
Do you have any like process of asking questions to the artist so you can delve in deeper to what they actually mean, or?
It really varies depending on who the person is. Some people are really, really great when it comes to articulating exactly what they want. Others, you got to work with them a little bit to kind of decipher what they are trying to really accomplish with their music.
Yeah,
I think Dave may have a bit more experience in that, and it's something that I've been trying to actually learn from him, to jump back to the mentor side of it.
Yeah,
if you got more input on that, Dave.
Yeah, it's really an interesting line that as a producer you have to draw, in that you hire a producer because you value his ideas. Yet it's not our record. And so what I generally will tell my clients, whether I'm producing or engineering, it doesn't really matter. It's like my job is to give you the benefit of my advice. I've been doing it a long time. My job is to give you my best advice for your record. Your job as an artist is not necessarily to take my advice, because it's your record. And so all of us, our role is to help the artist achieve the vision that they have. And so once I had to learn that, 15 or 20 years ago, that it's not my record, it's theirs. So sometimes you can pick through and let them talk about, I love the sound of Alanis Morissette's records, I want mine to sound like that. Or I hate the sound of Alanis Morissette records, I don't want my record to sound like that. But the closer you can hone into what they want, and then as the record progresses, you start hearing, okay, they liked this, they didn't like this. And so one of the reasons why I'm always happy to have clients sitting next to me when I mix, because I can look over and go, is this what you're hearing?
Mm-hmm.
And if they say no, I can fix it then.
Right.
And, you know, not necessarily for revisions, but at least for the basic mix, I'm always happy to have them there because I'm trying to make their best record.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing a rule I'd always had is you have to let them be happy with it, because they're going to live with that record for, you know, 3-4 years, and we're on to the next thing in a day or two. So, you know, you have to really pick your battles as to what you want to make your statement be. This will help your record. You know, this is not a big deal, and if you're happy with it, we'll just go that way. I learned a long time ago that they have to live with it for really the lifetime of their career, and we're moving on the next week to a different thing. So,
and how does that affect your judgment on things, Phil, for example?
well, I'm always wanting to try and make the best record I can make. I'll tell them if I think it's, you know, if the sound is not working or if it's a dumb idea. We do a lot of that up front, though. So we're working on songs. We're trying to make their songs better. So when all the homework is done ahead of time, it makes the record project a lot easier to work on. So we attack that at the front of it much more.
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense. And Dave, are you similar there, or do you have your own idea of stuff?
No, Phil's absolutely right. We do our best to make the best record we can. The time that it becomes more interesting is the best way to put it, is when what I think would make a better record and what the artist thinks would make a better record are not necessarily the same thing. And when those points diverge, that's when it comes right to what Phil was talking about. You pick your battles. If it's important to you, if you think the record will absolutely suck if you do what they want to do, then you talk to them a little more. But if it's not a big thing, I've had a number of artists that over the years, you know, well, since Melodyne and Autotune became popular, I've had artists that either absolutely want everything tuned so it sounds like a T-Pain record except country. I've had artists that come in saying, I don't want to tune anything. And both of those are a little bit extreme for my taste. But, you know, if the artist just says, I don't want it tuned, it doesn't matter what I think. Right. That's an artistic decision that they made, and I'm there to help them achieve that vision. And I can help them be out of tune just as easy as they can do it on their own.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess for you, Bobby, sorry,
Americana and organic thing. You know, they want it to sound organic.
Right. Yeah. And for you, Bobby, because, you know, being more on the engineering side, I guess, you have to please two people, essentially, the producer and the artist. Who do you focus on to please, so to speak? Is maybe it's the wrong word, but, you know, please first, the producer or the artist?
Whoever's right next to me.
Okay.
Good call.
No, I think I'm more inherently gonna go with the producer, because usually because if it's someone like Phil or Dave, because I work with them day in and, you know, what, 5 days a week, 40, 50 hours a week. So we've built up trust over 3-4 years now of like working side by side. So I know what they hear, and I trust their ears, maybe to a fault. The artist, though, you definitely do have to. It is like kind of like Phil said, it is their record. They have to live with that forever. So you have to put your faith in them to build what they want.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, if an artist come to you and say, I don't like the sound of that, you go, fine, we'll change it, etc. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I'll do my best to decipher what what purple means for their guitar sound, and make that sound a reality for them.
Yeah. I mean, it can be a tricky thing, I guess, when there's a lot of people who has opinions, and you're trying to make everyone happy, I guess.
Yeah. Plus, it is such a sensitive thing because a lot of music is so close to people's hearts that you got to walk kind of a really fine line between offending someone by saying that's a terrible idea, or saying or just living with it. Like it's such a delicate balance.
Yeah.
These are the artist's babies, basically. So yeah, you have to kind of treat it like that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, as soon as you say that's a terrible idea, what they hear is you're saying my baby's ugly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. And we actually, when Phil and I are working with Bobby, we generally don't put him into that kind of binary position of do I go with the artist or do I go with the producer?
Right.
As producers, we're trying to go with the artist as well. And so that's why I say our job is to tell them what we think is the best. Their job is not to take what we say as the way it has to be.
Yeah, if anything, the producer is kind of acting as like the translator from the artist to the engineer.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's very well put.
Back in the day, I've worked on sessions, and Phil probably has too, where essentially the engineer is not talking to the artist much. The engineer is talking to the producer. And because that's the producer's job, is to deal with the artist. The engineer's job is to hit record at the right time.
That's right.
And so, it's fine in these days when so many people are working in home studios where they're either recording themselves or they're going over to their friend Bob's house and Bob's recording them, and they're beer drinking buddies so they can get in big knockdown dragouts. In a professional studio, our goal is to keep moving forward, and not waste the artist's time, which means we're not wasting the artist's money. So we generally are not going to have those big discussions where I'm saying one thing to the engineer and the artist is saying another thing to the engineer, because that doesn't help the artist. Now, the issue that gets a little weirder is when we're recording bands. Because I have sat very quietly at my chair in front of the Pro Tools rig for 20 minutes while the band had a big knockdown drag out about the way a song should go.
Right.
And that's one of those where you learn that being quiet is really a good idea. That's like getting involved, with a couple that's having a fight in public. There's no winner to that. So when a band's having a spat about the way an arrangement ought to go, I mostly sit there till someone asks my opinion. And then I'll go, well, if you want my opinion, I'll tell you. But make sure that you want my opinion. Otherwise, I just become yet another person arguing in this thing.
Wow.
So a huge part of what we do, both as engineers and producers and sidemen, when we're back wearing that hat again, a huge part of what we do is not worrying about the technical side of recording or the technical side of the music. It's managing people.
Right.
Getting everybody working together is what we do. That's what we do. Everything else is just a result of getting everybody to work together.
Yeah. And if you find that a band is struggling, not fighting or anything, but let's say they're struggling to get a take, right? You can, something is not working. Do you have a process or different ideas you do to try to turn the situation around? Maybe
Phil?
Phil, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to go back to the song and say, okay, now when we're discussing variances of just interpretation, just make sure you understand what the artist is trying to convey, whether it's just a vibe in the verse that she wants to get back to, he or she wants to get back to, and just go back to the lowest level of communication where you get what they want to talk about, and then try to build it that way. Especially if there's a weird discussion, weird dynamic as far as who's winning. I think it always goes back to the song. So try to go back there, try to ask the person what they were trying to say at that point, and that helps you build the song.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and then you may end up doing another thing. Like if it's a band thing, I've done lots of projects where we're, again, since we believe in recording bands live because that's how music is made. There have been a lot of projects over the years where we're recording the band live, but knowing that we're going to have to go in and replace one person in the band, one note or, one section or one phrase at a time. But the part of that trick is learning how to handle it so that they don't feel singled out.
Sure.
You don't want them to feel like, well, the band cut it, but they didn't like what I played. So again, it's a lot of that it's I don't want to say a left brain, right brain thing, but it's kind of that you have to be listening to a band play, and on one hand, listening for the overall performance. This is how this song sounds, and on the other hand, you're also going, need to get the bass in the second verse, the drummer really hosed the fill coming out of the second chorus, so that if the band likes what they do, it's like, great, then that's our take. Now, let me keep the bass player out there for just a minute, and so you have to be able to keep everything keep basically not only the details, but the overall picture in your head at the same time so that you can hit those things while making them pretty transparent to the band. It's just working with people and making everybody feel like they're a valued contributor to the whole. And if you can do that and keep the band from going outside and getting in a fist fight, then that's a successful record right there.
Yeah. Exactly. Because I was talking to Celia Massey some 2 years ago maybe, and she had to go through a situation where she had to fire the drummer because the label didn't like the drummer for some reason. It was something like that. So that are some pretty tough things you could have to do as a producer. That would definitely be singling someone out. You don't want to end up in a situation like that, I guess.
And usually that's not part of our world. We're not there to rebuild the band. We're there to record who came in.
Yeah.
And if you want to do that, then if the band decides to do that, then we just move into a damage control mode and go, okay, so are we going to have the new guy replay all those parts? And if so, let's schedule the time and go do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's we're not there to be their parents. We're just their babysitters for a week or so.
Yeah. But since you guys have done a lot of work together at Sweetwater Studios, has there been anything that maybe you, Dave, picked up from Phil and been like, oh, that's really cool, I didn't even think about that? And maybe the same goes for you, Phil and Bobby. Has there been any of those moments where like, damn, that's really cool, for example? Maybe you can start with Phil.
Yeah, I mean, I've learned a lot just overall with Dave. It's great. He's an incredibly musical and creative bass player, so I love his ideas. And Bobby the same way. Pulling in, he's much more tapped into current stuff. So when we've got a young girl or a young kid that we're doing, we just did some stuff that was pretty aggressive, and I needed some of those whiz bangs, as I call them, for that just make a dance thing work better, an EDM thing work better. And so you pull, it's like a tool shed. You pull the best tools from the best guys, and ultimately make the project sound better.
Yeah. And say for you, Bobby, same question, I guess.
Well, Dave is the musical encyclopedia who knows every song pretty much ever, and who played on it, and who covered it, and why it sounds the way that it does.
Right.
So if I need to capture a specific vibe, he's my first go-to. And then for Phil, we call him the chord whisperer, because he can just hear how the chords go and how they're in how to make that song flow. And even with like my own personal music, I'm always throwing it at Phil, like, hey, make me cry and critique this, please, because he just knows how to make a song flow and how to make a song speak the emotion that you're trying to really emote. So between the two of them, it's crazy how much we can collaborate off of each other and how much we can learn from each other.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Like I said, really spoiled to work with them. It's great.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. And yeah, for you, Dave.
I was going to say, and Phil, because there's a lot of things, and every day there's more things that I don't know, especially about on the technology side. So Phil is like the virtual synth guy, the virtual instrument guy. And so he knows how to dig into that way deeper than I do. I think his room has stuff that none of the main rooms have. But the way that he layers stuff together to create sounds is like stuff that I've never done. And watching him create harmony parts is always fascinating. And then like with Bobby, not only do I not know what it is, I don't know what you call them. So like when we were doing the band, that they went, okay, we want to put a drop right here. And I went, let me call somebody in. And went, Bobby, what's a drop? And he went, oh, this is cool. I'll do one for you. And
that was actually a really fun day.
That was a fun day. Those were good guys.
Yeah.
They may come back in the next couple of weeks, by the way.
Awesome. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, they may come back to do a live stream thing. We'll find out after Saturday. So it's always about learning what the other guy, having the other guy's experiences will help all of us to work. The trick is, and fortunately, this environment is such that we're encouraged to do that. We're not discouraged from barging in and going, Bobby, I need something here. Make this work. Or he'll call me and ask me to come in. And, sure, if I'm not, pretty much for us, if we're not with a client at the time, if I'm not sitting there with a client next to me, if Bobby needs me for something or Phil needs me for something, I can take 10 minutes and go in there. And having
a team effort.
Yeah, it's definitely a team effort. And, and we'll do it with each other. We'll go to our tech guy and go, Nicholas, how do we do this? And then he'll tell us that, so we're encouraged to use the resources we have available to us.
Yeah.
And the three of us are three of the main resources we have available to us.
I mean, that's what seems so cool about you guys, the studio, because essentially as an artist, I could come in and rent the three of you and we make a record together, right?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, that would be a pretty badass record. So I encourage people to do that.
Awesome.
That would be pretty cool, actually.
Are you in the UK? Is that what I understand? You're in London?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you could get a flight, my friend Marie just was stuck in the UK for 6 weeks trying to get a flight back.
Wow. Was she back now then?
She got back 2 days ago, and nothing was coming out of London, and she ended up doing Manchester to Amsterdam to Atlanta.
Wow.
And so she made it all work, but her 3-week UK visit back home ended up turning into 9.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. Hopefully this thing is going to end sooner rather than later.
Yeah, we keep a good thought as long as everybody stays safe and washes their hands.
Yeah, exactly. But so I'm not too sure about the geography of. So Fort Wayne, is that close to Nashville or is?
No, we're about 7 hours from Nashville, where we really are. Like if you wanted to come see us, and we encourage that because we're here, we're happy to show people around. We'll buy you lunch if that makes it like.
Yeah.
We're about 3.5 hours from Chicago and about 3 hours from Detroit.
Wow.
2.5 hours from Indianapolis. But for you, flying London to Detroit and then a 3-hour drive.
Nice. But if I understand it correctly too, you and Phil started out in Nashville, right? Because it seems like the vibe seems Nashville-ish, like the studio, how you guys play, how it's run. Is that correct or? Maybe
I think the reason that it kind of has that vibe now is because so many of us are Phil's a Nashville guy. I'm a Nashville guy. Don, who is our guitar player, is a Nashville guy. The old director of recording, who's moved on to a new job as a freelancer, was a Nashville guy. He brought us all up.
Yeah.
And so basically, at least our tech is a Nashville guy. So Nicholas. So basically, there's a bunch of us here that are comfortable with the way that Nashville studios work. Mm-hmm. And so for no reason other than the fact that it's what we're used to, some of that vibe came up here with us.
Mm. Yeah.
If we were a bunch of New Yorkers then that would be a different vibe. Yeah,
exactly. But the Nashville thing seems to be working pretty fine. So it's a good thing you have.
It's a good system. It works.
But do you guys also then use, like, when you talk music to each other, is it the Nashville numbering system, or it's not that common anymore, or what's the situation?
No, that's actually very common. When Phil's writing arrangements, because he's doing it in not Sibelius, what's the other one?
Yeah, Sibelius. That's it.
Sibelius. So Phil's generally writing the charts that we're reading in a program. So he's printing out the actual chords. Mm-hmm. I tend to, because of my background, like even though it's a keyboard centric project that we're doing next week, when I wrote the charts, I wrote number charts because it's quicker, it's easier. I don't need any tools. I can sit there with a piece of paper and a pencil and write a chart, and that's all I need. So I tend to write number charts, and everybody here can read them, and they make sense. So and I've actually found that the number system has become common way away from Nashville. I was real tickled to find that out. I was doing a thing with some guys from Kansas City. Actually, it was a Western music band, and so I was ready to pull out chords or do whatever I needed to do, and then the guitar player went, "Oh yeah, so I'll do the 3 minor to the 5 there, and it'll be great." And I went, "Done." Nice. So bluegrassers are using it. People who are outside of the Nashville community have accepted that as a logical way to do things.
And it's really handy if you don't know the artist, and you don't know the key, and you need to move it 1/2 step or whatever. It's there's no work involved. It's a real easy thing to do, right. And so that's real handy.
Yeah. I saw a video where you, Phil, explain the simplicity of it, and it seems really intuitive to use. Actually, I never use it myself. Actually,
right. I mean, it's all just based on theory. We don't draw it the same way as the old Roman numeral kind of thing, but it's all that basic same theory that you learned wherever you learned in piano or choir or whatever.
Freshman theory college.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I when I first started doing it, when I played on my very first session, which was a long time ago, that studio in Texas happened to use the Roman numeral system, which is still, 1s, 4s, and 5s. Major chords were written with capital letters. Minor chords were written with small letters, which is more like jazz notation. And so when I moved to Nashville, I just went, "Oh, they're using Arabic numerals. Great, done. I have what I need." And it was as simple as that. And I've a dear friend that he told me about 10 years ago that the very first session he played on ever, I was on, and he's a Eastman graduate, which is one of the more prestigious music schools here. And he said he got called for his first session, and they put down those numbers in front of him, and he thought, "Holy crap, I am in the wrong world." It was Jeff Taylor. And it's like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. And he told me that I just went over and went, "Here's how it works." And I told him, and it made sense. And he did the session, did great. And I had no memory of it until when he told me that. It was there, but that's the thing. It's like we want to help. We want to get the song cut. We want to move on and cut the next one.
Right.
So and the number system helps us. Remember, it came up in the early 60s with a vocal group called the Jordanaires. They invented it.
Right.
And they invented it because in that era, Nashville sessions have always been fairly brutal in that even in the 60s, the session players were expected to get 4 songs in 3 hours. Wow. And this is in the days when they were recording live, including with background singers and strings. So the Jordanaires came up with this idea of just writing melodies using numbers because, you know, they didn't have time to memorize anything. And singers would end up, they'd get in the studio and go, yeah, I know I said B flat, but we need to do that in C. You know, and if you printed out sheet music, then you have to go get the copyist to rewrite it all up a step. Right. And so the Jordanaires came up with that idea, and they just write those numbers over the lyrics, the song lyrics. And the session guys finally went, what kind of math are y'all doing over there? And so the session guys, which would have been probably Bob Moore and Harold Bradley and those guys went, I believe we'll steal that. And so that's how it became the Nashville thing, is the A-team players. I was going to say 4 songs a session. They were doing 4 sessions a day, 7 days a week.
Wow.
You know, this was the golden era of Nashville's country. And those guys who were the A-team were doing about 80% of the sessions in Nashville. Right. So, you know, there apparently a lot of marriages dissolved then, but they made a lot of great records.
Yeah. I mean, have you, maybe start with Dave, have you been in a musical situation where you thought, damn, I don't know what I'm doing or how I can make this work? And you made it work in then, maybe. Yeah. Could you share a story from...
Absolutely. It wasn't really a session, but you know, I've been playing live my whole life. And I remember I got called to do it was actually a wedding between a Brazilian and an Argentinian in Nashville. Big wedding. And so the band that hired me to play, it was basically everything was tangos and salsas. You know, it was all Argentinian and Brazilian music. We had a band leader who could not play or speak loud enough to be heard, and he wanted to do songs continuously. So he just kind of turned around and go to 23. So you're supposed to flip over in your book to the next song. Well, and I didn't know any of those tunes. I couldn't hear when it was ready to change. I couldn't hear his guitar. The keyboard player's first gig was that night. So if she couldn't hear a song, she just didn't play the downbeat. So I'm out there all by myself. And at one point I was thinking, you know what? If someone offered me $100 for this modulus bass, I would sell it and go work at a grocery store. But, you know, we got through the gig and I did a ton more work for that guy. But it just, when you're in the middle of something like that, you just feel like, I think someone needs to shoot me in my head and put me out of my misery. And all of us have had that.
Yeah. What about you, Phil? Do you have a situation like that too?
I mean, I don't know if I've had one that I felt totally out of water, but what we do as players is you just try to bring your best tools to the game, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. You know, so they're, you know, players that play jazz way better than I do, and so I'll usually try to say, okay, that's why I want to listen to the songs. And so if there's a song that needs that kind of thing, I've told guys before, I'm not your guy on that. And so you just have to be brutally honest with the artist or the producer, and you know, bring your tools that you can enhance a song on the ones you can, but then graciously bow out if you can when it's not your cup of tea.
Yeah, exactly. Also, the same question to you, Bobby. Do you have a favorite failure in the studio, so to speak?
Ooh. Okay, so I think it was like a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago. There's a session with it was Dave on bass, Nick on drums. I think Don was playing. I'm not sure if I think you were on it, Phil, because I think it was a Sibelius chart, and I was getting completely lost. So they went through it a few times, and they finally got a really good take, and they just need to do a few small tweaks, and I kept going to the completely wrong sections, and then we finally got through it, and then at the end I realized I had the wrong chart. So it was an older version, and I think there was either I think they maybe added a turnaround, or they removed one from one section and moved around, and I was so confused. But we got a really good song in the end, if I recall correctly. I would say that'd be that one, or if I forgot to move like a microphone. There was one time for a percussionist that was in the ISO booth. For some reason, the left percussion overhead was really, really quiet, so I just had to crank it way up. It sounded all right. And then at the very end of the session, we realized that it had gotten twisted away from the entire percussion set.
All right. That explains it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Phil, Dave, and Bobby, for coming on to the show. It was a pleasure talking to you guys, and I hope you, the listener, enjoyed it as well, despite maybe some lags here and there, but I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. And also, before you leave, please leave a comment and a rating if you listen to an Apple podcast. If you listen on YouTube, please subscribe and leave a comment below if you liked the interview and if you have any questions, perhaps. And also, don't forget to download the free guide, 3 tested ways to increase your client base. Made this guide for home studio owners and freelancers who wants to increase their client base. So in this guide, you can learn my tested email script of how to contact bands online, how to get clients in real life, offline, so to speak, and how to get clients coming back for more. But that's it for this week. I'll see you guys soon, and have a good week.